Welcome back to yet another template design walkthrough. The name of this design is Disco. So we're going to jump over here and take a look at the layers that are in this design. We have a subject on the top that we'll turn on and throw in here in just a minute, but let's look at the layers as they exist in the download. Starting at the top are our color grading layers. Again, these layers are used. If you haven't used designs from our site before, they are to add a little bit of extra contrast and color and depth into the image. They're really to polish the image off. Now this is a group of layers. If we expand this, you can see the groups that exist within here. And you're going to see there's three, and there's something a little unique about this group this time. So the bottom two are doing the heavy lifting on the color grading, but you're going to notice this new layer in here. And again, as always, the layer names are going to have the descriptions of what's going on. But this is, I'm calling this the color grade warmth control. So your opacity is of this layer is going to change kind of the warmth level of what this color grade is picking up. So the idea is if you're bringing your subjects in relatively warm to start with, the color grading is going to add more warmth. This is kind of like a little safety check layer where you can turn that warmth from the color grade up and down just a bit. So it's kind of preset here like 42%, so kind of like a medium amount. So this color grade is still getting applied. It's just losing a little bit of the warmth. And we'll look at it when we turn our subject on about how that's affecting the subject. But as we go down below that, this is our facial highlight boost layers. These are really designed to add a little bit of brightness onto the subject's face with just a little bit of color tonality, just so their face kind of pops a little bit more. Below that we have a text group. So this is our text down at the bottom. This is grouped because it has some layer style effects attached to it. So we have a stroke line, we have an outer glow, and I like to group these because by doing so, it means you can kind of sandwich the text together and just have this effect go around the outside of all the text, versus if this effect were just on each layer, then you would have that effect running between and kind of making a weird separation between the text. So that's why it's in a group like that. In front of this, we have some foreground light glows. This is going to become more obvious as we put a subject in. You can kind of see them in here, staggered in. It's just to create this look of like reflected little light squares to kind of play up this disco theme on this. Below that, we have our dark and lower subject. You can see it's clipped to our red group. Our red group signifies where the subject goes. So it's just going to do some darkening on the subject's legs. The group here does have some effects applied. It says drop shadow. That's actually set up to create some glow. You'll see that. And it's masked so that the subject's legs are going to get masked to fade out in the bottom. And you're going to see, you're just going to open this group, drop your subject right here, which we'll do momentarily. If we continue down, this is that top text. It's preset with some layer style effects on it. The stroke is turned off by default. You could always turn that on, but I kind of like the look of it off. Then there's some outer glow, and here's this drop shadow. You can see if we turn this drop shadow on and off, this is what's going to kind of happen with the subject too. We're actually using the drop shadow as a glow versus a shadow. All right, below that's a couple layers, one clip to the other. So the one is this background glow. So that's what's creating this big kind of highlight gradient here. And this glow control is just, it's changing it so it's not so overly saturated and it has a little more controlled look to it. This is a gradient layer. And we'll look at, if we want to change colors, we really don't have to get into a lot of this, but there is one spot where we'll change those coming up. Below that is this background spot gradient. So basically that's what's taking this whole background and creating this nice dark gradient so that glow, it's kind of like an inverted glow really to create that effect. Below that, marked in blue, this is where we're going to change the color of the background. This is a hue saturation adjustment layer. So that means you just need to adjust the hue, the saturation, or the lightness sliders to get the color that you want, and this is going to give you a lot greater control over the color. So if we wanted this to be green, we could slide this over to the green. You could make it less saturated if you wanted a little bit more saturation transition in that glow, or you could make it punchier by bringing it up more. And of course, you could change like the brightness of that kind of spotlight effect by bringing the lightness up and down. All right, so we'll reset that for now. Below that is another couple of layers, one clip to the other. So what's happening is we have our background squares. So that's all these little square shapes that create and make up the background. And then we have this gradient that are clipped to that. So if we turn our spot gradient off, we can see this is what's creating that overall gradient clipped to each one of these little squares to create this effect. Because then our background is just simply black. All right, so it's definitely going to show up best black, but you could play around with doing different colors or different shades of backgrounds and seeing what you like there. But we'll leave it black for now because I think that looks cool with the overall design. All right, so let's jump up and turn a subject on. So here's our subject. We can see this is what our subject looks like just by dropping in on top of everything. So just to show the effect, if we drop the subject directly under the color grading layers, you can automatically see how that changes. You can see the color gets a little bit more saturated. There's a little bit more contrast and kind of punchiness being added to everything. And it's just that polishing that's happening there. If we expand this color grading warmth, if we turn this off, you can kind of see how the subject's color goes very warm. So you could use this, you could turn this all the way off with a slider if you wanted a little bit more warmth. Or if you want to kill all of the warmth coming from the color grade, then you could just turn this up to 100%. And so you can see, if we turn this off and on, we're still getting that massive effect of the color grade. This is just determining how much of that warmth is coming through with it. So I like it kind of mid-range to add a little bit of warmth in there. I think looks pretty nice. So now let's actually drop our subject down into the group where they go. So that's going to be in here. I moved the wrong layer. Let me redo this again. All right, subject down into the group. So now that you can see that our subject is in its group, there's some things happening. So one, we're getting kind of this drop shadow, which is being used as this glow to create this glowy kind of effect and this brightening around the entirety of the subject. All right, so you're going to see that right off the bat, so we can just kind of place our subject where we want them. So right there will be good. The effect looks good. And then you're going to see those foreground light glows. So that's this layer that was hard to see before. It's going to just create these kind of dynamic looking glows against the subject and their skin and things like that. So again, it feels more like that, almost like that disco ball reflection type of thing, but just created in a little geometric pattern there to look pretty neat. All right, so let's change the colors. So if we want to make things red, I would start down here with the one marked in blue. Let's just go ahead and make this red. Now, one thing I find when working with reds in Photoshop is I actually like to just edge things towards orange just a little bit. Just the flat red often doesn't look that great to me. It doesn't look very dynamic. But if you just slightly push it orange, you can kind of see how that glow kind of changes effect just a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to push it just a hint towards orange. You can see I've only got that set to 4, so not even very much, but it looks a little bit nicer to me for a red. All right, so there's that red. So now we need to change our text to work with this red. So let's come up here to our Rockets text. So let's change this to Wildcats. As always, the links to the fonts I'm using in the samples are on the product page. All right, so updating our text. Now let's go to our outer glow. And instead of blue, we want to move this up towards the red range. That looks pretty good. Of course, you could make this brighter if you wanted to, but I like that bit of saturation in there. And then the drop shadow, you can see that's just a neutral color, so you shouldn't really have to do anything with that. It's just changing that outer glow on there. Oops, I meant to say okay, not cancel. Let's reset this. All right, so push that up to red. Okay. And okay. And let me just say, you could also edge this towards the orange tones as well, depending on, how dynamic you want. Like, a lot of times red in real life has a lot of those shades of orange in it. If you're using like a red gel or something, it's easy to pick up a lot of those orange tones. So sometimes I like to throw, just a bit of orange tones in to make that red feel a little bit more interesting. All right, let's click OK. And then the bottom text, that's up here in our text group. So once again, we can just double click here, go into our stroke. Let's move this up to red as well. And then our outer glow, we're going to do the same thing, move that up to red as well. And this, again, you could play with the different values of these. We could try to push it. Let's go a little bit more towards the orange side of that one. And then that stroke line, you could always make that brighter. You could make it completely white. I mean, it's really whatever you like the look of. Kind of like the look of the white there. Maybe I'll make the size of it a bit smaller. I think that looks pretty cool. I like that right there. So we'd say okay, and then the last thing I'd want to do is come up to our facial highlight boost. So if I want to brighten her face, we have two options. One is kind of preset for some darker skin tone ranges, one for lighter skin tone ranges. So I'm just going to make sure the mask is selected and highlighted with the white box. I'm going to grab a white brush at 100% flow. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my hardness is 0 on that brush. And let's make our brush a little bit bigger. And then I'm just going to come right over here and just paint over her face. And then we could change that opacity to get whatever effect we wanted. You could also double click if it's a little bit too warm. You could take some of the warmth off by pushing this more towards white or neutral. Again, that's totally up to you. But there we get just a little bit of lifting of those highlights on the face, just so we get that attention back on our portrait. And there we go. That's the layers in Disco. And that's how we would drop a subject in and easily set that up. So I hope you get a lot of use out of this one. I would love to see how you're using it, and I can't wait to see it on the next video.